Hello and welcome to the program. I am DEJI. Now, it's been about 2 months since Nigeria partially shut its borders against its neighbors. The closure of Nigeria-Benin Republic border took effect in August, and shortly after, that of Cameroon and Niger also came into force. The Nigerian government says taking the decision became imperative in order to address the smuggling of contraband items, especially rice, from these countries into Nigeria. President Muhammadu Buhari says the flooding of imported food items into the Nigerian market is stifling government's plan to attain food self-sufficiency and undermining local farmers as well as the agriculture policy of the government. Despite appeals to review the decision, the government has refused to budge. Not even appeals by the governments of Ghana and Benin Republic has made the Nigerian government change its mind. And just last week, the Controller General of the Nigerian Customs Service, Hamid Ali, even took it further by announcing a total and indefinite ban on import and export of goods through land borders. Now, while this may be good for local farmers, some Nigerians are seriously groaning over the effects of the policy on staples like rice, which of course has seen prices actually go up. Some people are projecting that the price of rice could go up as high as even 50,000 naira as we approach December. Well, we have to wait and see if that really happens. But joining me now from Abuja to speak more on this policy is Adewale Ajadi, who is an agricultural development expert and has actually worked with local rice farmers in the 3 states of Benue, Kogi, and Kaduna, providing them with training and capacity. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Now, what do you make of this idea of shutting the borders now just to have local farmers or just to make local farmers happy?
Well, it's a very powerful and helpful thing on the medium and the longer term. The short-term challenges that people face in terms of price should not blind us to the fact that we have to be self-sufficient as our population grows and as our need grows, especially when we have made a choice that we would focus on rice as a staple food for many of us. So if we are importing rice that is challenging to our people's health, rice itself is parboiled rice is challenging, period. Because if you parboil rice, you're taking away a lot of the nutrients. And so it's a very sensible thing that the government's doing. It's very challenging for the people in the short term, but I think it's a good kind of policy for our agriculture development.
Now, quite a number of people are actually complaining about the policy, and we've seen the price of rice, for instance, gone up. And then there's also the fear that if this is allowed to continue, if the border closure is allowed to continue till probably, say, the end of the year, then by December, the price of rice would probably go off the roof, and then people will just not be able to buy the staple.
You know, it's instructive. You say it's a staple. Rice was not a staple. How did it become a staple? How did it become that we don't have the variety of healthy foods and healthy options that are available to us? We are the largest producers of yam. Yam is a lot more healthy as a carbohydrate than rice. But given what people love and what they consume, we can't suddenly change those things. So that's the fact that we are committed to eating rice, and we eat a lot of rice. Having said that, we cannot sacrifice the future on the basis of just short-term consumption. It's a fact that we have a growing and a young population. It's a fact that we have to produce for that population. It's also a given fact that the rice that we import is often expired and often dangerous for consumption. There isn't much that the government can do otherwise than close the border to prevent the smuggling. And this is, they've already taken a policy stance that's affected legal importation of rice. If you look at the amount we used to spend on importation of rice from the CBN, that's dropped about 90%. You know, so they've taken what they could do legally without taking aggressive action as they've taken now. But in spite of that, people are still smuggling in rice. And actually, what you have to also bear in mind is that there is enough evidence, there's enough anecdotal evidence that people even rebag local rice so that they can look like they're imported, so that people can purchase them. It's a very telling thing. We are addicted to things that are purchased from abroad. Why is that? And why wouldn't government change that? Because it's not sustainable. We don't have the money, we don't have the tax receipts that would lead to that. We haven't developed our infrastructure strong enough, and we're spending obscene amounts of money on the importation of rice from countries that use the receipts from our own income to grow their own economy. I think that what the government is doing is right, but I think that they have to do things that encourages access to Nigerian rice. That includes, they have to do things that improves access to Nigerian rice and Nigerian products, agricultural products. That includes making sure that local governments provide platforms for the dissemination of local products. That includes getting SON and NAFDAC to reduce the bureaucracy and ensure that safety is the primary focus rather than infrastructure and expensive things, so that people can produce and process things. That they need to invest in the fact that the things that come out of the farms are sustained, they're processed and they're sustained, because we're losing a lot of harvest because we don't have ways of processing them and sustaining them. So there are many things that government can do in the short and medium time to improve the quality and the viability of made in Nigerian agricultural products.
Now, these things you have identified, don't you think they should be done first before the closure? Because the argument is that local rice farmers do not have the capacity to feed Nigerians, that we do not have the capacity now to feed or to produce as much as we need to consume in this country. I'm talking about local rice farmers now, that they just can't produce what the country actually needs at the moment.
That's factually incorrect. We produce more than we need for our population. Generally, we produce, and we can't refocus the entire Nigerian agricultural and dietary requirements just to rice. Rice is one product. There are many, many other products people can eat. The Nigerian farmer produces enough. Well, it's not aggregated well enough, and it's not disbursed well enough. And a lot of it is wasted at the market, at the farm gates, but certainly we produce enough. And the challenge is to create the capacity to ensure that people have access and that the products have a longer shelf life. And actually that is happening increasingly. If you go into the supermarkets across the country, if you go into markets, you see produce made in Nigeria. But it's very difficult, because many of the people who produce are smallholders. You need people to aggregate. I agree with you that there are things the government can do to improve, but you don't have the resources to continue fuel this kind of importation. The oil market is not buoyant. We don't pay enough taxes to sustain government and the requirements that we have. We have to be realistic. We cannot continue to have an economy that is just about consumption, not about production. It's a very dangerous trend that we've had for many years. If you're going to diversify our economy, you have to take direct action to reduce our dependency. And I think that this might work, and it mightn't. The government has to take risks. There are risks involved here. I'm not saying there are no risks, and I'm not saying it's a perfect solution, but I'm saying that it's a solution. Now, the challenge for the government is to build on that solution, to use the opportunity of the closed border to improve the capacity of Nigerian-made products to compete, to ensure that the infrastructure are given, the facilities are given to the people who are producing things, to ensure that the infrastructure is improved so that distribution of rice reaches all the major centers where rice is being consumed, to ensure that there is different ways in which Nigerian products are identified and identifiable, to ensure that our markets are improved. Nobody wants to go into markets that are full of dirt and not hygienic themselves. These are things And you can't put it just on the federal government. You know, the problem in Nigeria is that we think that everything has to be done on the federal level. The state government has a profound responsibility under the Constitution for agricultural development, and so do local governments. What do local governments do? Why can't they manage the markets more effectively? Why can't they ensure that products that are produced in their local governments are available more viably? They have a role to play. So I think that we are ignoring the point that there are parts of our system that can be improved that will make sure that this border closure and the sacrifice that people are making as a result of the border closure gives benefit to all of us.
Now, I know you work with rice farmers in states across the country. I'm talking about states like Benue, for instance. Now, you think our local farmers actually have the capacity to feed Nigerians?
Well, we have enough information. I mean, we have to improve our data collection, by the way. But we have enough information to know that we produce more than enough for our population. Not just rice. You keep on going back to rice. I'm not talking just about rice. Because the nutritional benefits of rice, especially parboiled rice, is really, really marginal. So, I mean, if we are thinking about the health of our people, if we are thinking about their viability and not dying, because you spend a lot of time eating rice, and what about the diabetic effect and all of those things, that actually, what is the nutritional benefit of that rice? So you have to look across the world. Our farmers produce cassava, we're about #1 in the world. We produce yam, we're about #1 in the world, and a few other things like that. And a lot of these things go to waste. I mean, let me give you a little anecdote. The other day I was reviewing countries in Africa that are taking advantage of the fact that avocado is really has a great demand in the United States, and the demand is not being fulfilled. And the shocking thing is that Kenya is producing avocado and exporting it to the United States. We produce so much avocado in this country. Even if then it goes to waste. It goes to waste. Look at mangoes. Our mangoes is exceptional in the world. I don't think that anybody who has seen my Nigerian mango or tasted it would ever want anything else as mango. But it goes to waste immensely. You know, you can talk about our pineapples. You can talk about a lot of things. And most of our fruits, they're not really particularly cultivated. They're just available to us by virtue of an incredible blessing in terms of the soil and the opportunities that we have. So, I mean, essentially what I'm saying to you is that if we can get our act together, a lot of these things about rice and all of those things would not be as significant as we are making it. You know, I'm quite sure you know this. I don't know how old you are, but I'll tell you, as old as I am, I remember a time when having jollof rice was only on special occasions. You know, and this is rice that's not even healthy for us. This is polished rice where a lot of the nutrients are gone. So my own argument to you is that our farmers produce enough. We don't sustain it well. We don't manage it well. We don't organize it well. We don't distribute it well. We need to get better at those things. But in terms of the production, we produce enough to feed our country. Now, we have to be able to aggregate it. And we have to be able to get it to the point where people need it and can utilize it. And that's a critical issue.
Now, just before I let you go, what do you think in terms of our agricultural policy now? What do you think needs to change?
Well, we need to really, really focus on getting the system to work for the things you're talking about, the well-being of our people, to make sure that what we produce is managed effectively and gets to the table of people, to make sure that we maintain our organic capacity, to make sure that we have good soil practices, where people slash and burn the land, to recognize that there is climate change. You know, these are all management issues. But, you know, the problem is the strategic focus of federal government has to be connected with the operational focus of the state governments. And it has to be connected to what the local governments do. And there's still a disconnect. You know, the state governments are used to federal government giving them allocation from oil. And so the internally generated revenue aspects of agriculture is not developed. The employment opportunities of agriculture are not well developed. The entire value chain, including the capacity to develop online solutions, digital solutions regarding agriculture, are not well developed. We're just starting out. The last administration did a lot. We need to build on it. We need to ensure that we don't go back to the days where agriculture is just marginal to our economy.
And I think you're quite right. It's really quite surprising that you look across this country, you take a look at our states, they are actually not investing in agriculture at all. Same thing with local government areas. It just doesn't make sense. And, they all want to actually expand their internally generated revenue, but they're actually not investing in agriculture, which some people would say, is basically a quick win. It's quite frustrating that everyone will be looking at the federal government now. I'm not saying they have to, go own their own farms and all of that, but to be candid, the states and local governments are actually not doing enough in terms of expanding agriculture and trying to make something out of it in their various states and their local government areas.
Well, you certainly have to give credit to states like Kaduna, who have done exceptionally well. The governor has championed agriculture, is engaged women in agriculture, aside from the fact that there's been security issues. Kaduna is, for example, a state that really has done well on agriculture, and we're proud to be associated with them. And the commitment, and if there are no security challenges, it will be one of the most exceptional states. But the challenge, of course, is that it is not just about production. The big problem is that we just produce. The real issue is to make sure that we produce for a market. So we understand the consumption patterns of people. We know what is required by supermarkets. We know what is required by different catchments of population. And then we start to educate our farmers in how to produce for that market. What is the point in producing a lot of cassava if nobody is going to buy the cassava and it's going to be a glut? What is the point in producing a lot of yam, as they do in Benue, and we don't export it, and everybody is taking our lunch because Nigeria is the largest producer of yam by far. We waste a lot of yam in Katsina Ala. We don't get it out of the country. And Ghana is #1 exporter of yam in the world. So there are many ways in which we can improve the capacity. And actually, one of the reasons why we have this difficulty is that more than 50% of the agricultural workers are women. How can we neglect women's capacity and we hope to turn this country around? It is not possible. You can't neglect 50% of your population and excel. So there has to be recognition that all the parochial notions of what the role of women in the economy, role of women in the home, role of women in the marketplace, we have to uplift it and make sure that women's contribution is recognized as part of our viability. This is not about liberalism or anything. This is about critical saving of our lives. If it is projected that Nigerian population will be over 700 million by 2100, are we ready for that? Are we thinking about that? We need to really start thinking about 2 generations ahead and what they are going to consume.
Mr. Adewale Ajadi, thank you very much for joining us on the program, and thank you very much for your thoughts. Well, we'll take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll be looking at President Buhari's new travel guidelines now for ministers and the heads of government departments and agencies. Stay with us. On DEJI 360, we don't just ask the questions. What is wrong with amending the Constitution the way the National Assembly members have been doing it? We seek answers.
Constitution is constituent. Our problem is not lack of laws. Our problem is lack of the willpower to implement our laws.
Answers that provide clarity.
While we negotiate, we should try to make it a point that the girls must be complete.
The clarity you need to make informed judgment so that you can make the right decision and take action. People are saying it is you politicians that are responsible for this, that you are the reason why this is happening.
All these dollars that call themselves governors in this country?
I wish we had people like Tony at the National Assembly.
God forbid that I go to join that band.
DEJI 360, providing clarity to issues. Welcome back. Now, oftentimes when discussions rise about the need to cut down on the cost of governance in Nigeria, what mostly comes up is excessive spending, particularly in the area of official travels by government officials. To partly address this, President Muhammadu Buhari has issued strict travel guidelines for public officers, which mandates all ministries ministers, I should say, and heads and CEOs of departments and agencies to submit their yearly travel plans for statutory meetings and engagements for clearance before implementation. The President, in a statement issued by the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, also said all public-funded travels, whether local or foreign, must be strictly for official purposes, backed with documentary evidence. Also, ministers, permanent secretaries, chairmen of extra-ministerial departments, chief executive officers, and directors of government departments and agencies, of course, are restricted to not more than 2 foreign travels in a quarter, except, of course, with the express approval of the President. And in the case where a minister is heading an official delegation, the size of that delegation shall not exceed 4, including the relevant director, schedule officer, and 1 aide of the minister. In addition, travel days will no longer attract payment of extra code allowances. Now, this reviews truly could not have come at a better time. The country is struggling to raise revenue to meet its budget commitments and so cannot afford leakages and wastage. Truth is that the monies that could be saved from this directive could actually be channeled into other crucial aspects that will boost the country's economy. Let's now discuss this further with political analyst Jide Ojo, who joins me from Abuja. Jide, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
It's a pleasure.
How significant do you think this initiative is?
Well, it is significant to the extent that for the very first time in a long while, we have a situation where the president, in pandering to public opinion about the need to reduce the cost of governance, has issued a circular to all public servants, including ministers, to cut down on their travel, not more than twice in a quarter. And this has to be pre-approved. Aside from that, you are not going to get paid extra for the days of events, not the days of travel or any other days you spend. And this will save the country a lot of billions of naira being wasted on frivolous travels. Recall that this is also ancillary to the 2015 establishment of the efficiency unit of the Ministry of Finance, where it was even decided that only ailments that cannot be healed in Nigeria will be taken abroad for medical tourism. And all of this will help to substantially reduce the cost of governance in Nigeria. Although it is not far-reaching enough, but it's a very good way to start on the second term of this administration.
And just as you said, before now, people did not know that these foreign travels actually cost the country a lot. And you have a situation where government officials will travel even when they have nothing to do abroad. They will travel at the expense, of course, of the country. The government, I should say. And this is definitely going to save the country some huge amount of money.
Yeah, sure. Like I said earlier on, it's a step in the right direction, even though it's going to pitch the president against the public servant. Because many civil servants actually use these extra codes to show up their low salaries. And now that you only get paid for the days of events. So if you go abroad for a 2-day program, the arrival and departure days does not attract any extra code. You only get 2 days pay. And that has not been what they are used to. Recall that some of them will go some 2-3 days before the event and return some 2-3 days after the events have even finished. And all in a bid to increase their extra costs that will accrue to them at the end of that trip. Many frivolous trips have been arranged. You even will realize that many civil servants just to go on trips, even when there is no need or when they will not be adding any value to those trips. Even the UN General Assembly that the president went just September last month. Just imagine the sheer number of Nigerian delegation to that UN General Assembly. Some of them do not even have any role to play. But they went all the same, believing that at least an opportunity for them to earn some decent income at the expense of the federal government of Nigeria.
Now, beyond the executive, don't you think, for instance, that at the federal level, the other arms of government too should try to do the same? I'm talking about the judiciary and the legislature as well. For instance, the judiciary, we know how much, for instance, some senior judicial officers could spend on foreign travels, especially, for instance, if you consider the case that came up with some of the judges whose homes were raided some time ago and dollars were actually found in there, and some of them actually came out to say there were dollars, they saved from foreign trips, Esther codes now from foreign trips. Now, it means they make so much money, especially when you consider the huge amount of dollars now recovered from some of their homes. Now, don't you think that even in the judiciary as well as the legislature, that it is necessary that this policy actually applies?
I agree with you completely that it should go across board. Look at the 125 billion voted for the federal parliamentarians, the National Assembly. It's on the high side. It is very much on the high side, given the fact that we have a 2.1 trillion deficit in the 2020 budget. We couldn't just afford, and this is just revenue projection of 8.1 trillion, that we are not too sure we will hand that income in 2020. So you already are looking for 2.1 trillion to borrow to fund the budget. You have increased the VAT from 5% to 7.5% to fund the budget. And you now have this coterie of public servants who are less than 100,000 in number. The number of federal civil servants that I know is about 87 or something in the neighborhood of 90,000. You now have this handful of Nigerians spending billions of naira on travels, many of whom are needless. So I agree with you completely that the judiciary as well as the National Assembly also needs to trim down on some of their travels. Even though you go on recess, which is normal, recall that every year between July and September, the National Assembly goes on annual recess. It's not mandatory for you to go on foreign travels for your vacation. There are beautiful places in Nigeria, the Obudukatu Ranch, the Tinapa, the Yankari Game Reserve, and several others, where they will have their holidays or vacations. And this also should be a cue by the president. The president, I don't see any reason why he has to go to UK for his vacation. Charity should be from home. In 2020 budget, the presidency voted 3.3 billion for foreign travels. This is on the high side. I think the president needs to trim that at least by 1 billion. Reduce that foreign travel substantially. Many of the international summits, he doesn't have to go there personally. He could send a minister or head of a parastatal or department or agency to represent him. He should cut down on his foreign travel at his age. His age is not on his side to be doing all these diplomatic shuttles any longer. I'm not saying he should not go on foreign trips, but just like he has ordered his ministers, he should also set the pace by ensuring that only very important travels are embarked upon by himself and his vice president. So that's why I said in my opening comment that what the president has said is not far-reaching enough. I really, for instance, do not see the reason why the president will have appointed 42 ministers with himself added. That's 43. Section 147, subsection 3 of the Nigerian Constitution only said he should appoint one minister per state. So let's assume that he appoint 36 and appoint one for FCT. That makes 37. Why do we have to go 43? And this 43 will have special assistant, senior special assistant, special advisor, senior special advisor, and all of these are just a drain on our little resources. For instance, why does the president need 5 or 6 aircraft in his presidential fleet when the UK Prime Minister does not even have 2? I think the British Prime Minister travels British Airways. The Queen of England travels British Airways. The Pope, who has over 1 billion Catholics under him, travels Alitalia airline. Why should our president have 5, 6 aircraft in his presidential fleet, which is maintained with very huge cost at the expense of the taxpayers? So for me, these are things that he needs to also look at and trim down.
Well, very true. Well said, no doubt. But let's go beyond the national level now and look at the subnational level as well. I'm talking about the state. The fact is that state governors and state executive are also involved in this, and you have state legislature as well involved in this. Don't you think they themselves should actually, take a cue from the president and probably implement this policy as well?
DEJI, I agree with you completely on this. But the federal government does not have control over what the state does. It's something they should take a cue, but I think we need to tinker with the constitution to formalize this. Because if you leave it to the pandering and to the whims and caprices of the governors and local government chairpersons, they will never do it. Don't forget, this also is traceable to campaign finance. When these people spend billions of naira to win offices, their aim of recouping their expenses is from some of these frivolous travels. I'm not saying that's the only reason. We have over-invoicing and all that corrupt practices that they engage in, where they try to recoup their election expenses. But, the governors, there are governors that won't even stay up to 2 weeks in their state. They are either in Abuja or they are outside of the country, under one guise or the other. Many of them will claim that they have gone to look for foreign investors. And you never will see the investors coming to invest in their states or even coming to Nigeria at all. But they go on vacation more or less, running their states through telephone, just calling from abroad to know what the situation is on ground at home. That is not good enough. But if we don't tinker with the constitution, for instance, let me say something that is very commendable that the Ekiti State Governor just did this week. Yeah, and that's by signing the transition bill into law, which will bind successive administration not to abandon projects that are started or initiated by their predecessors. Billions of naira have been wasted through such project abandonment, all because you are not the party in power when that project was initiated. And I think we need such a transition bill at the federal level, which will spell out, the nature and character of travels that should be approved or state funded. I like the fact that we have now, at least with the circular that was issued by the Secretary to the federal government this week, said that you can only have official travels bankrolled by the federal government. There are a lot of people who will go on social visits and put the bill on the federal government. Many of them will go for weddings and birthdays of their children or of themselves, wedding anniversary, and they will put it on the federal government. That has stopped now. But more importantly, DEJI, is the need for enforcement. Because these civil servants has a very clever way of finding loopholes in the system to be able to justify some of these frivolous travels. Like I said earlier on, is one honey pot nobody will want to break, because that is where they show up their revenue, aside from their salaries, which every one of them have been complaining is insufficient for them. It is from these frivolous travels that they have been making extra income. And now that this has come to an end, they will find a more creative and ingenious ways to also be making money. So this has to be comprehensively looked at to ensure that, one, there is proper enforcement. I saw in the circular that the Office of Auditor General have been asked to be vigilant and to ensure that anyone who contravenes this circular is made to pay back whatever he has taken illegally from the public treasury. But we do also know that the Office of Auditor General has not been well resourced to be able to perform its duty. Many a time, the Auditor General of the Federation has cried out that it's understaffed, it's under-resourced to be able to perform the enormous. Look at the number of MDAs we have in Nigeria. A school of thought said we have about 541 of them. And just one Office of Auditor General with maybe less than 50 staff is expected to audit all of these federal, all of these gargantuan number of government-owned agencies and enterprises. So I think for the Office of Auditor General to perform its monitoring duty efficiently and effectively, it has to be well resourced with personnel, with funds, with the requisite capacity building to be able to carry out forensic audit to ensure that there is adequate compliance with this directive.
Well, Jide Ojo, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us, and thank you very much for joining us on the program. Well, that's it on the program. If you want to watch it again, it's very simple. Just go to our website, tv360nigeria.com. You'll find this program and lots more there. You can also follow us on our various social media platforms. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.